Good evening YouTube, my name is Yusuf and you are watching my news channel. Today we are May the 27th of the year 2021. So there was a CME impact yesterday on the 26th, and as I mentioned it before in my previous video, we will probably not see a geomagnetic storm level 2 unless the BZ component stays negative. And as you can already see, we only reached a geomagnetic storm briefly, level 1, as it reached the KP5, because the BZ component went only for a few hours negative, then it went positive again, then negative again, but it never stayed into negative territory. If you look here in purple, this actually represents each time that it went negative. And as you can see, it was more positive than negative. So chances of reaching a geomagnetic storm level 2 are now as good as over. And speaking of which, the CME itself is basically almost over. We can still see some trailing. There are still 400 kilometers a second. The density is still there more or less, but definitely subsiding. And I'm guessing that we are actually exiting now the plasma which was pushed by the CME. Looking at the magnetometers, this is actually interesting because this CME actually left a significant signature on the magnetometers. When you look at the 7-day, we can see even when there was actually space weather conditions, ongoing space weather conditions, only that CME impact produced a significant jolt in the magneto readings. Looking at the flaring activity, I want to show again the 7-day plot because, as you know, there was a sun-diving comet which appeared on the 22 May and actually left on more or less 23 May. And in my opinion, this uptick was entirely caused by that sun-diving comet, and I mentioned it in one of my videos. I believe it was the previous one, not the last one, but the previous one. So you can actually compare here a little bit of flaring activity and when the comet happens. So basically a comet, as I said, increases the solar activity of whatever is ongoing at that moment. If it's a filament, it has a chance to erupt and make a big eruption. If it is sunspots, they become more active, etc. Looking at the CME tracker for today, there isn't much data, only 20 frames, so we'll have to see once this gets updated, but already I'm seeing that there's actually a CME. It would be interesting to see if it is actually Earth facing. Yes, looking at the ISWA simulation, there's actually a CME which can be seen. I'm guessing it was the one which I mentioned in my video. In my last video, there was a CME at midnight, if I'm not mistaken. And that's probably this one. It will completely miss our planet. And since we are talking about ISWA, yet again, there is data which is missing. And this time it's so obvious, and I'm wondering why they even bother. But before, let's take a look at the magnetopause standoff position. Let me just hide this a little bit. We can see that it is actually distancing itself from geosynchronous orbit, and that's a good sign. But again, NASA deletes like half an hour, and what happens is so obvious, I don't think words are needed, but I will say it nonetheless for those who are new. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe, otherwise you will miss any future content that I make, and that would be really sad, or at least make me sad. So as you can see clearly, again, data goes missing and something happens. And it's the exact same thing. It's conductivity between the inner region, the inner energy belts, and the power shock or the magnetosphere, to be more precise. And in this one, it is best visible because you can actually see a lot of energy, as you can see, also on the bow shock. And yet again, those inner energy belts try to connect with the bow shock. And what will happen next, I already know, because there were a few instances where the data was not missing. What will happen is basically the magnetosphere becomes all twisted and deformed, and then that energy gets siphoned. And this is the end product. This is what, oh yes, this is the, before it actually happens, you can clearly see a connection. And then afterwards, after this half hour, all the energy is gone. So basically what happens is there is conductivity between the Van Allen belts and the magnetosphere. And just when that happens, especially at the bow shock, there are deformations at the magnetosphere. And this is what they are trying to hide. Showed this in many other videos. Let's take a look actually at the field lines. This is also visible over here. But what surprises me is why they don't bother to hide it completely. Because they could easily, for example, oh yeah, actually I do understand. Yes, no matter what they would have done, it would still be visible. It's actually that transition that they wanted to hide. But let's take a look over here. So this is prior to the loss of data. We can see the closed field lines from the back expanding. We see a little bit of retraction in the front. And then all of a sudden, we see on the back that the closed field lines collapse and they expand at the front. And you can clearly see energy from that bow shock pouring into these inner energy belts along the closed field lines. And this is, I mean, so obvious. So yet again, NASA hiding and at the same time not hiding it, because you can actually still see it, but they cannot hide this because, as you can see, otherwise they have to delete basically almost everything. And typically they just delete the transition because it's then when the weird stuff actually happens. So there you have it again, an anomaly which is lost, at least a transition. If you look at the Schuman resonance, we see a very big signature. And this is when that Kp actually was reached, that geomagnetic storm level 1. This is normal. Energy enters our planet and our planet reacts. This is important because it covers low frequencies, the same as the human brain, but also our body. So your emotional state, your psychological state, but also your physical state can be affected by the Schuman resonance. Looking at the earthquakes, we don't see any major earthquakes. This is normal. This is just a KP5, but we could still see an increase in seismicity in the coming hours. This is also possible. So before I end the video, I want to show a last item because I will make a weather video sometime. I don't know when, but I will be covering, as usual, the polar vortex, which has more or less regained its shape and is trying, as I can see, to go over the Arctic. Still not there, still only at the edges. It has to be in the middle. For example, if we go to the southern hemisphere, you can clearly see that it has to be on top of the polar region, but there is positive development. So I will cover this one of these days, and you will have, of course, this way another weather update. Okay, let's end with a philosophical quote as usual, and then we take our leave. So, number 47, yes, so it's now number 48. There is not half so much danger in the desperate sword of a known foe as in the smooth insinuations of a pretended friend. This basically means that you're more likely to be stabbed by a friend than to be hurt by someone who is a known enemy, because when you are around that enemy, you know it and you raise your defenses. But this is not the case with a friend that you trust, and so he is more likely to hurt you if he wants to. This is it. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it as usual, and I guess we see each other next time. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.